Hi, Chickenbone John here. Welcome to another episode of Making a Cigar Box Guitar. This time we're going to be trimming the fret ends and rounding them off so that you end up with a really nice, smooth, playable neck. I think this is one of the distinctions of a well-made guitar. It takes a little time and effort. It doesn't take any special tools. Really, the most of what we're going to be doing is with an ordinary smooth file. You can get lots of special tools. I'll show you them, but they're not essential. Let's get to it. Here we have our neck that we just put frets in on the last episode. What we're going to do is to trim back these sharp fret ends that are sticking out here. They're sticking out a millimetre or two. You want to have clipped these back. You don't want to have long ends protruding. Now I've got here a few tools. Don't be daunted by the fact that I've put all these out. I've acquired these over the years, but you can really get away with, I think, just 2 of these and you can do a decent job. I'll just go through what I've got here. I've got a selection of files from a coarse or bastard cut, a large one, and then I've got some sort of 6-inch files here, which is a bastard, a second cut, which is like a middle, medium, a smooth or fine file. I've got a couple of smooth files here, sorry, these 2, and they've had the edges ground off. You usually see a lot of files will have a cutting edge and a safe edge, what we call a safe edge. These have actually had one safe edge polished and one safe edge just radiused off a wee bit. Then we've got a few of the specialist files here, like this one, which has got a concave groove in it for putting a radius on, and here's same sort of thing with a jumbo and a medium file in here. A couple of files which are just wedged into, being sort of clipped into a wooden block. These are sort of micro mesh things. They look a little bit like emery boards for doing your nails. Very similar sort of thing. And we've got the thing we used last time, the leveling beam. Bit of wire wool and a slotted protector for the frets, which we'll show you later how we can do that. But we can bring all this down, I think, to 2 tools. A smooth file in some shape or other for just trimming the ends, I say a second cut or a smooth, and a smooth file on its own which has got these edges ground and polished. You can do that yourself if you want. You know, you can just sort of sand this back with emery and polish it and just get the sharp edges off this, put a radius on. It's a bit, as I say, it's a bit of a grind, literally, but you know, it's something you can do. So we're going to fix our neck down to the bench just as we did before. If you remember, we're going to use a scrap that's the same thickness as the heel, so the neck is supported, and when we clamp it down we're not inducing any stress, any bending or any twisting. So I'm just going to put this down with my speed clamps onto the bench. Just make sure that that is out of the way where we might be using the file, and clamp down here. So that should be pretty well supported. Actually, I'll just move that in a bit, that's better. So we're nice and well supported. We're going to file this. I'll just show you the pitfalls of using various tools. This is just an ordinary file, and you can see the handle is sort of going to get in the way of the fretboard. You can use this. But you have to be very careful about that. So it's possible to take the handle off and use it with just a tang, and I would not recommend that under any circumstances, because when you're filing you've got this sharp spike sticking out here which can go into your wrist. So don't use a file without a handle. If you're using it like this, you're going to have to learn to keep it out of the way. So you can see I'm tilting the file up so the handle is sticking out of the way. Now this is all a bit uneven, so what I'm doing with it is I'm going vertical to get these cut ends. And you see I'm tilting the file up, so I'm making sure I'm not hitting the handle on here. This is a bastard cut, which is taking quite a lot. Sometimes it might be a bit grabby. You might be better using a second or medium cut file. This will take a little longer, but what you don't want to be doing is grabbing onto these frets and pulling them out. It's quite easy to do that. They're just held in there by the friction. We've not glued them. So do make sure you're not sort of pulling these. So we need to be going along the length of the fretboard, nice and steady. You do need to be careful you don't pull the file over and mar the tops of this. So the first thing we want to do is to get the fret ends level with the wood. Oh, you need to spend a bit more time here because the frets are more tightly grouped. So it takes a lot more on each go. But once you've started doing this, you can start it will feel like it's sort of gliding against the wood. You get quite a lot of swarf, a lot of the cut particles. Don't let that build up. It's worthwhile just brushing that out so it doesn't catch on here. Now we've got that pretty well down. This is why I like using this sort of file. This is exactly the same file as that, but as you can see the tang's been cut off and ground and it's been mounted on a block. This is actually friction mounted, so if this does wear you can flip it over. But you can you see? That's a lot more manageable. I can grab it where I want to rather than having to have the handle and try and keep that ferrule out of the way. Can put my fingers on the top like that to keep it in line so it's not going to pop up over the top. And looking here I can see I'm beginning, there's a little bit of brown dust coming up where I'm just beginning to hit the fretboard now. So I don't want to go too far. But a lot of this, as I will keep repeating, is about the feel, the feedback you get between what's happening here and into your fingers, and I can actually feel, I've got a cup, I can actually feel where the fret ends are. They're sticking out. Now that's pretty well flush, but that's vertical. It's cut so the fret ends are vertical. What we want is to put a bevel, an angle on here. Now I always do this by hand. You can buy files that are set into a block that people sort of say, oh, it should be 30 degrees, and they'll set the file into a block and it rides along the top. I have made one of these myself and I do not like it, and here's for why. Because basically your file gets sit into a block something like that, and this block, to keep it at the angle, runs along the top of the frets. And what happens, all that metal dust that builds up gets caught up on whatever's going along the frets and starts putting lines, tram lines, scores into it with just the metal dust that's coming up. I think it's a really bad idea. If you're going to use something like that, make one of your own so that the guide runs along the side of the neck where it's going to do less damage, and you could set your file like that. But personally, I think this is a much better tool. You can still do it with a file like that, and you'll have to hold. You won't use a handle. You'll run the file like that. Okay? You can see that's working. That's the smooth. But I find it's much easier if you've got a file like this set on a block. You can hold it properly. You can see the angle that you're going to be cutting it as well. I'm using the smooth. It takes a little bit more time. I think that the bastard cut, the coarse cut, it catches the fret ends, and I really don't want them to be pulling these fret ends out the slot. So we have to work a little bit more up at the top end because there's more frets on each pass. But I can feel the edge of the wood. That file is beginning to glide. I can tell exactly which frets are standing proud when I do that. I can actually feel it. We'll just brush that away. Okay. That's beginning to look a lot better. See, we've got this angle established now of about 30 degrees. Still got some work to do. I can still feel it catching a wee bit. Now, that's not too bad. But you've got the sharp edge here, the bit that's been cut by the file at this angle. So that's still sharp. And also here, the corners where the fret hits the fretboard, that is another bit you can snag your finger on. So what we're going to do is get rid of that. I'll just work on a couple of frets because I've got the camera focused on this, and I'm going to take one of these files. This is one. Can you see? It's got this smooth edge and it's got a rounded edge here. And let's see if we can get you in the picture. And what I'm going to do first is get rid of this just where it hits the fretboard. And I've got this. Remember, this is a safe edge, but don't press down too much on it. And I'm just going to, you see, I'm rolling that round. Just a couple of passes, and I'm going to do the same again. Very lightly. I'm not pressing down. I'm feeling. Now I'm going to round. It's taking that bit out, and then what I can do is roll the file over. So I'm touching all of that arch of that end. So it's rounded that way, and it's rounded that way, and that's very smooth to the touch. There are a few ways of doing this. Let's just do another one here. See, it just needs a couple of passes with that. I can feel it biting, and then I'm going to roll that over. That's all there is to it. I can finish up with that if I want. That already feels a lot better. Let's do it with a couple of other tools. See, that's the simplest tool. That is the simplest tool, just a plain file. That's one I bought. This is one I made myself, just from an ordinary smooth file. You do exactly the same thing. We're on the file here, yep. We're just turning that corner, turning that edge, and then rolling it. rolling it over so it hits the whole end of that fret. Here's another tool you can use. This is a proper fret file, and it's got a 2 and a 2.5mm wide concave groove in here. So what you can do, if we come on here, we can radius that over. Now some people would just do that and call it done, and indeed that feels fine without doing that. But if I just run my fingernail, I can feel there's a tiny sharpness to it. So I would still prefer to go back in and just take that tiny bit where the fret hits the fretboard and take that out. Okay, let's do another one, and we'll use this type. This is what I first had, but I used this type of file I think for a long time, but I do find that these, which are interchangeable, you just unscrew this little screw at the end and you can replace it and you get small, medium and large file. I think they're sometimes called a Gurian fret file. I do find that they do wear, whereas this one has lasted me fine. And again, the ordinary simple file with the edges polished off does exactly the same job. Let's go up to this fret here, same sort of thing. I can feel it's not cutting quite so well. So very common tool, but I've got to say not my favourite. And we're still left with having to, let's say, some people will leave that, but it still leaves me with that to do. Okay, so we just continue right the way up the fretboard. I'm going to stop here and we'll show you finishing the rest of it off. So as I say, we need to go the whole length of the fretboard, and then what we would do, it would repeat exactly the same process on the other side of the board. So we flip over, clamp our neck with the support as usual. You should be getting familiar with this operation now. I would say don't try and do this job holding it down and filing. It's rather unsatisfactory in my book. What I could do is I can go straight to my file here. Yeah, and keeping my fingers on top of it. You see, I'm keeping my fingers on top so it's not going to come across here and scratch your frets. Same process as we did before. You know, we'll get that down. As I move onto the bastard cut, that's more aggressive. There's more chance of you disturbing the frets, I think, though, with a coarse file like that. I think that's fine if you know what you're doing. If you're just starting, that might be a bit of a recipe for disaster, because you could rip it's possible, if you're a bit heavy-handed, to rip a fret out with that. So we do exactly what we did before. Get that nice and smooth. Keep brushing the swarf off, and then remember we come in. Yeah, I'm keeping a finger across there so it's not going to flip and scratch it with the edge. Exactly like we did on the other side. And then we go to the rounding off. So we'll just cut there and come back once we've beveled and rounded all our fret edges. So we've got all our fret ends beveled and rounded off. Once we've done that, I'm going to give it a final pass with my smooth file, so I know there's no fret end, and then I'm just going to roll it slightly. So I'm not going to straight bevel. I'm going to roll it a little bit. You may prefer to keep a straight bevel on that, but I've just rolled that. Just finding out where. Still got some one or two rough edges. Then what I can also do, this is not essential, but what I sometimes will do, we'll take my leveling beam and I'm using the fine side, and I'll do the same thing. What this is doing is making sure this is all done evenly, in perfect alignment all the way up the neck. And I'm just beginning to, you can see the dust picking up here as I'm hitting the radius, as I'm putting a little radius on that corner. That just makes it a little bit more comfortable to play. You can put as little or as much on as you wish, but be careful you don't come too far flat with your board and start hitting the top. You don't want that. Okay, again, just keep it clean so you can see what you're doing. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take one of my, this is basically a micro mesh stick, same as the pad, and I'm going to repeat the process, so we go finer. As we go up here, it's making sure all those fret ends, and then we're going to go to a really quite a fine. Just going to brush that off, so I'm not, if there's any dust, it's going to get caught and it can scratch your frets. So I'm going all the way, I'm beginning to round over, sort of going onto the top. What we'll do, turn it round, do the other side, and then if you want to get a really nice finish, you can actually polish the frets. All I've got here, this is off the side of a toaster, and I'll just put some protective tape on the back. You can actually buy little masks like this, and you can either use something like your micro mesh to give it a final polish, or wire wool. This is this triple or quad O. I'm not quite. It's called superfine. Yeah, it's quadruple O, superfine wire wool. Some people don't like using this because of the dust it creates, and you might be able to see the difference, the shine here. Let's see if we can get in here a little bit. So I say we can put our mask on here, and we're just burnishing it. No polishing compound, just a bit of wire wool, as I say, or you can use your micro mesh pad. It just softens all these little sharp edges and polishes up the fret wire. The fret wire will get a little bit of oxidation, unless you're using something like stainless steel. Oops. Unless you're using something like stainless steel. But I can see it's just nicely cleaning up those ends of the frets. And once again, keep brushing the dust away. I can see the difference between these few frets that I've polished here and the rest of the fretboard. And check with your fingers, does it feel nice and smooth? And that does. Okay, actually one thing you may notice once you've built your guitar, sometimes the neck may shrink a little bit and the fret ends may stick out. It's called, some people call it fret sprout, and you'll feel this sharp edge. It happens on all guitars. It's just the seasonal drying and swelling of the wood due to humidity and temperature changes, and this will happen. And if it happens, you can repeat the process we've done there, but obviously you do have to be very careful about the finish down the side of your neck, not to mar it. So you might want to tape that up and do the same sort of process, and then as the wood expands a little bit, it'll cover it up. But just a tip, if that happens, sometimes weeks after you've made it, as it acclimatizes, if your timber's been somewhere a little bit more humid, if it's been in the shed or the garage, which it shouldn't be, comes into the house, dries out a bit, and you get these sharp edges. Nothing to really worry about. What we do find is, this is the blackwood tech, and this seems less prone to it than natural wood product. I mean, it's a natural wood product, but it's been pressure and heat treated into a stable format, and it seems less affected by humidity and temperature changes. We did one with I think we compared one with a walnut fretboard on one of these, and the walnut, you could, after a few weeks, you could just feel the fret ends. Okay, I hope you managed to follow that, and you should have ended up with a guitar neck that's nicely radiused, and also the fret ends are also beautifully radiused and polished, so that is going to play really nice, feel good in the hand, you're not going to catch yourself. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Bye for now.